I'm assuming a lot of you here would have heard of the name Razorpay. We'd like to think we're one of India's top payment gateway providers. We power the payments of quite a few marquee enterprise brands in the country, Flipkart, Swiggy, a whole host of other brands. We also power the SMB universe. Multiple lakhs of small and medium enterprises in the country actually use our suite of payment solutions. I take care of the SMB business practice. In addition to that, what I also do is I serve as a marketing mentor, a digital marketing mentor advisor, working with various early stage startup incubation platforms like the Thai Kerala chapter, the Thai Ahmedabad chapter. I notice quite a few people here are from Ahmedabad. So I am associated with the Thai Ahmedabad chapter, the Atal Innovation Mission by the Government of India. So I am a digital marketing mentor there on standby, working with the portfolio startups there, helping them on digital marketing, on growth strategies for their business. I'm also associated with another incubator here in Bangalore called as the Pace Derby Incubator. I also serve as a visiting faculty member working with various B schools in the country. I am Bangalore, I am Kashipur, I am Indore, etc. where I can conduct programs on digital marketing. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at e-tailing for $1 billion. Essentially our agenda over the next 20 to 30 minutes or so is to essentially have a quick sneak peek into the great Indian digital story, something that all of us are aware of, but something that we will get a quick sense check on. We look at what are some of the core digital marketing startup engines that an early stage startup needs to focus on. That's something that we will look at. I notice there are quite a few, most of you here are early stage startups and a lot of you here are founders, entrepreneurs yourself. So we look at what are some of the basic conundrums, basic questions that are faced with a founder who's looking to grow his or her company, right? We look at some of the conundrums are, should I focus more on Google? Should I focus more on Facebook, right? These are some basic level questions that are faced with every founder of an early stage startup. I'll talk through before Razorpay. I used to lead marketing for what today is one of India's leading mobile health tech brands. It's a key competitor to CultFit. I used to lead marketing for what is today one of the world's leading edtech companies. So I'll talk about my experiences from both of these organizations as well in terms of what worked from a digital marketing standpoint. In the first case, we'll talk about it primarily from an acquisition standpoint, what we did to acquire more customers. The second case, the edtech example, we'll talk about what we did to engage and nurture the customers that we actually managed to acquire, something that's a little bit of a forgotten art in marketing, so to speak, and not so much focused on. So we look at both of these before we wrap up. So the great Indian digital story, all of us are aware of this. More than 500 million, digital population as of 12 months ago, which has grown another 10% in the last 12 months or so. Something that was fairly significant, and this was an epochal moment that happened around 12 to 18 months back. Till then, Google was, and even today, by the way, is having an undisputed monopoly in India, and Google search was the dominant entry point for Indians to enter the web world. But that changed around 12 to 18 months back when mobile apps overtook it. And for the first time ever, apps were the #1 logical entry point for Indians who were looking to enter the digital universe, which was a significant milestone event which happened 12 to 18 months back. We know that we have close to 300 million plus users on Facebook in India. And another epochal moment that happened again around 12 to 18 months back is that this is the typical marketing funnel that most of us are aware of. If there are any marketers amidst us, they would certainly relate with this, where consumers are taken through awareness for a brand before they move into consideration for a brand, saying that I am aware that there is this particular brand called, say, a Magento. Then I move into the consideration phase where I consider, I develop a certain affinity towards a particular brand, and it moves into a long list of a consideration set, Magento along with possibly a few other brands. Then it moves into evaluation where that long list becomes a short list and you have a very strong affinity towards a brand, and then people eventually take action of a purchase. So till again around 12 to 18 months back, television was the primary medium for building brand awareness. All of the digital media forced to reinforce that awareness in a lot of cases. For the first time ever in India around 12 to 18 months back, that changed. Digital became the #1 awareness building medium. Television moved one phase further down in the life cycle, moved into the consideration phase. Again, it points to the growth of digital in India. Now what we'll do is, let's take a quick, this is a little bit of a fork in the road. Let's change direction slightly and look at what are some of the core startup engines
that an early stage startup needs to focus on? What are some of the key conundrums, as I said, key questions that face early stage startups and how we may navigate those? There are two large things that a startup needs to focus on, right? An early stage company or a growth stage company needs to focus on. One is acquisition. How do I get new customers to come to me? How do I push my brand out there? Right? How do I get people to come to me as a brand? Which essentially in marketing jargon speak is referred to as top of the funnel. How do I get more and more people to come to me? If I'm having, say, a website, how do I attract more traffic? How do I attract more app installs if I'm having a mobile app? So from an acquisition perspective, from a customer acquisition perspective, one of the key questions that any early stage startup has is, I have limited resources, I have limited budget, what should I focus on more? I have limited time, what should I focus on more? Should I focus on Google, should I focus on Facebook? And in a lot of cases, it is not an either or question, it's a question of priority. What should I prioritize more? That becomes a fundamental question. I have some rules of thumb here, some kind of heuristic rules that you could follow, which can help you make a more informed choice. This is something that's always worked for me. The first question you need to ask yourself is my product mass or niche? So you've got to ask yourself, am I possibly a fish, maybe a polka dotted fish, a striped fish, which is possibly living in a relatively large pond of water, or am I a relatively large fish which is operating in a small pond? So essentially, is my product mass or niche? Say, let's say you're selling t-shirts online, for example, as a business idea, but there is obviously something unique about the t-shirts you sell. It's a fairly mass market, right? Which means there is already a lot of demand, latent search volume demand for that particular category in the Google search universe. Right? That's an example of a mass market. Obviously, there is something unique about your offering. Versus, say, let's say you're selling sherwanis online. Right? That's an example of a niche market. Right? A market for which there is not a lot of pre-existing demand out there. Now, not all of us are Amazon. We don't have the ability to be able to create demand. So you've got to be obviously be able to piggyback on existing demand, existing search volume demand which is out there. So that becomes a fundamental question. There are various ways in which you can answer this question. One is, you as a founder, as a marketing person, would already have a certain gut instinct on whether your category, your business operates in a niche or a mass space. That's one. A more scientific approach there would be to use the Google Keyword Planner. You log into Google AdWords, figure out what kind of search volume demands your particular category has. So both of these, one which is more gut based, the second which is more a scientific approach, can help you answer this particular question. If it is a mass category, and what do I mean by mass? If it is a category that already has a lot of latent search volume potential which is already out there, then obviously you need to prioritize Google. But it's not just a simple if then else, right? If it is not mass, if it is niche, you don't necessarily jump down the Facebook bandwagon. You've got to ask yourself one other question. If it is niche and if it is high engagement category that you operate in, which gives you as a marketer, as a brand, the opportunity to inject a very strong visual element in your marketing communications, which can build a strong level of, say, customer empathy, then you possibly gravitate to Facebook. Now, there's a difference here. There's a caveat here as well. A lot of people mistakenly equate niche and high engagement with high transaction frequency. Now, for example, the Ola mobile app, that's an example of an app which is very transactional, which is very high on frequency of usage. People use it possibly 20 to 40 times a month, but it is not high engagement, right? It is very transactional in nature. The company that I used to lead marketing for prior to Razorpay was a company called Healthify Me, which happens to be one of India's leading health tech mobile apps. That's an example of a high engagement app, both in terms of time spent and in terms of the category in which it operated in, because it was about weight loss. It was about health and fitness, which is very close to the identity of an individual. Right? So people actually engage with the app, they consume the content on the app, they log their calories on the app. This is the amount of food I had. I actually had 2 idlis and a cup of coffee for breakfast right now. So they log that on the app. Right? I actually did 20 push-ups in the morning. Those are the calories that I actually burnt. I went for a 5-kilometer jog in the morning. So these are things that are very close to the identity of an individual. So that's an example of a high engagement app. So when I actually first joined this company 3 years ago, the mobile health tech company, Healthify Me, it was a bit of a culture shock for me. Because till then, in all of my experiences before, Facebook had never worked for me as a dhanda driving, hard-working, performance marketing channel. It had always worked as quote-unquote a brand channel, right, which could drive brand awareness, reinforcement, etc. For the first time ever, Facebook was in fact doing even better than Google AdWords, than Google search. Why? Because it checked off all these boxes. This was a category, because prior to this, I had never worked in a category which was niche, but yet high on engagement. Right? How many people actually want to track calories in India, right? It's a very niche segment. right? So, which doesn't necessarily mean Facebook would work, but Facebook actually worked well for us as a performance marketing channel, as a channel that could drive real business growth and revenue, which was directly attributable to the campaigns because it was high engagement. People were spending a lot of time on the app. It was very close to the identity of an individual. Plus, additionally, from a marketing communication perspective, we as a brand never directly did any selling of ourselves. What we did was we relied on our users to narrate authentic life stories of themselves through testimonials. And that was literally the only kind of communication that we used. So if there is, say, a 45-year-old middle-aged man sitting in Surat who is suffering from, say, diabetes, for example, he or she would see a video on Facebook which is featuring a consumer persona just like himself, right? An older consumer persona who has gone through similar things in his or her life, right? Who's overcome diabetes, who's overcome hypertension, etc. through the app, which builds a lot of empathy, which is exactly the reason why Facebook worked for us. Likewise, if there is, say, a 20-something user who's sitting in a Mumbai or a Bangalore who wants to build six-pack abs, who wants to bulk up, who wants to muzzle up, right? So they again would see testimonial videos featuring consumer personae similar to themselves, younger consumer personae. So that was something that worked really well for us in the health tech case. So as I said, you've got to distinguish, is it high engagement? Even if it is niche, you've got to ask yourself, is it high engagement or not? That's the first question you've got to ask yourself. For example, Ola 6-7 years ago, how many people were actually looking to book taxi cabs using a mobile app? Hardly anybody. Back in 2013, 2014, it was a very, very niche space, but Facebook never worked for them during their initial days. Because it was a fairly niche space, but it wasn't high engagement. It was extremely transactional. In which case, a lot of us might be operating in categories like those where the demand is low, so you can't necessarily go down Google's bandwagon and start running ads because there are not a lot of people who are actually searching for your category on Google. It is a fairly transactional space possibly. It's not very high engagement, so you can't necessarily go down Facebook. So what do you do then? That's the third path which you've got to take, wherein you focus on categories that are neighboring, tangential to the direct category that you operate in, right, which don't necessarily overlap. You try to capture a lead funnel from that category by writing high quality content, by making sure that organically you start ranking for those keywords, and then you try to build your marketing funnel. That's exactly how it works. So if essentially, long story short, if it is a mass space, high demand, a lot of latent demand already on Google, obviously you go down Google's path. If it is niche and high engagement, you use Facebook. If it is niche but not quite high engagement, it's relatively more transactional, then you look at keyword universes, which are a little more tangential, a little more just at the periphery, just at the boundary of the direct category that you operate in. For example, if say you're selling sherwanis and you don't directly talk about sherwani itself, but you talk about men's fashion as a space, which is the largest space which goes beyond your category itself. You talk about wedding fashion, right? Things like these, which would be an example of the miscellaneous neighboring tangential spaces that I spoke about. Quick snapshot of what we did at Healthify Me, the key elements of our mobile marketing recipe. One of the first things, as I said, was Facebook, because it gave us a tremendous advantage to be able to target consumer personae and to be able to slice and dice creatives. As I said, the middle-aged man in Surat, the kind of creative that person sees would be completely different from the kind of creative a 25-year-old would be seeing sitting in Bangalore or a Mumbai. Both of these would feature consumer personae that were very relatable to that particular recipient. Google was something that always worked well for us, both in Facebook and in Google. Something that we did a lot of was we used both outside in and inside out targeting matrices, so to speak. By outside in, what do I mean? We already had an understanding of what kind of consumer personae worked well for us, right? So we typically went after relatively older consumers on Facebook. We went after people who had already shown a certain kind of affinity for health and fitness in terms of the pages that they actually liked. We had a thriving NRI business. So we looked for surrogate signals which pointed to the fact that these were NRIs. So if somebody is actually following Bollywood and cricket and sitting in Texas, it's a fairly good chance that the person is Indian. We looked at signals like these, and obviously the older the person, the greater the probability that the person is relatively unhealthy and has a greater propensity to pay. We were a freemium app, so we specifically targeted older age cohorts. That's something that we always did. What we also did is some kind of inside-out targeting as well in addition to this, wherein we said that, let's say that the people sitting here in the first 3 rows, the 7, 8 odd people, are the people who actually bought from me this month. Now what I do is I pass this information back to Facebook and to Google, and I say, Facebook, listen, here is the information of these 7 people who actually bought from me this month. Now find me 700 more like these. Right? I asked Facebook to find me clones of the people who are actually transacting with me. We have various kinds of events that we tracked, what we used to call upstream, midstream and downstream events. We used to map the entire user journey there that the users actually went through on our app. So initially when a user registers, installs the app. They go through an elaborate registration process wherein we ask them a whole host of information in terms of their gender, age, whether they're suffering from a lifestyle disease, and how far back did they actually discover the fact that they had a lifestyle disease. We ask them a whole bunch of questions like these to be able to qualify and target our communication better. In terms of upstream events that we track is the simple act of tracking calories. I just had 2 idlis for breakfast. I just did a Surya Namaskar for my morning exercise, right? These are some early stage upstream events that we track, and this is available for free. A midstream event would be we specifically target certain user cohorts. I know that typically, historically, people from Mumbai and Bangalore convert the best for me. Right, these are my 2 best cities. So if there are people in Mumbai and Bangalore using an iPhone, for example, we look at a bunch of variables. One is geography, one is phone, who are, say, suffering from diabetes, who have some kind of a lifestyle disease before, there is a very strong propensity or a probability of them to convert. So I specifically target those user cohorts with some kind of product funnel hooks. It could be a 7-day free trial. It could be a free diet consultation with one of my top nutritionists. It could be multiple things. So we used to use hooks like these for getting people to move further on in the life cycle, which is exactly what we're talking about here. Specific product funnel hooks which were targeted at specific user cohorts. So we had a lead scoring algorithm in the back end which used to look at a bunch of these variables, right? Demography, geography, phone make. An iPhone user I typically know typically tends to convert better and tends to pay more than a person who's using an Android phone. So I look at historical data points like these. ASO, I'm not sure if a lot of you have heard of this term. It's App Store Optimization. You can think of it as SEO's cousin. I'm sure most of you here would have heard of SEO, Search Engine Optimization. You can think of ASO as SEO's cousin in the mobile app world. So how do you make sure that your App Store listing actually bubbles up on top for user search queries? We did a lot of email marketing in addition to push notifications, and we made sure that we had some basic hygiene elements in place. While we were an app-only company and an app-first company, we made sure that our web presence had these basic hygiene elements like accelerated mobile pages, right, which makes sure that your mobile web presence loads in a jiffy. This is a simple architectural tweak that you need to make in your front-end code to make your page load faster, something that's essential for you to rank higher on mobile search results. That's what we did at Healthify Me from an acquisition perspective and from the perspective of making sure that users actually converted and moved further and further along in the funnel. From an engagement and nurture perspective, what exactly do we mean? It's about doing more with the cohort of users that you've already attracted. While acquisition is about bringing more and more people in, engagement nurture is about making sure that you look at your current pipeline of leads, look at your current prospects, look at previous customers who have transacted with you, look at people who might have dropped outside of your funnel, who are kind of hibernating, who are not quite transacting with you, who are not quite engaging with you as a brand. How can you get them to convert? How can you get them to pay? These are people who already have had a touch point with the brand. How do you get them to move forward? How do you get to engage and nurture them with good quality content? So there are multiple things. If you are running a startup, again, as I said, it's a function of resources. How do you decide the priority stack for engagement and nurture in your company? There are multiple ways in which you can go about doing this. At the highest level, at the most philosophical level possible, your relative priority for engagement and nurturing is a function of how many questions are there in your prospect's head. Right? The greater the number of questions, the greater the need for engagement and nurturing. Let's say I'm looking to buy a cell phone, a Samsung cell phone from online. I'm looking to buy it online. It doesn't matter whether I buy it from a Flipkart or an Amazon, it's the same phone. I'm looking to buy a bag of baby diapers. It's the same bag, regardless of which platform I buy it from. But let's say that I'm looking to buy, I want to lose weight and I want to sign up for an online health plan, right? Now, each platform defines it differently. A Cult Fit defines it differently. A Healthify Me goes about doing it differently. Each platform does this differently. I want to say learn digital marketing online. I go to a Simply Learn, which is the company that we're referencing here. I go to maybe a Digital Vidya, a few other brands. I go to maybe an Upgrad, a fairly popular brand here in Mumbai. Each of them again define it differently. Each of them go about doing it differently because there is very limited levels of standardization. So there is a greater need for you as a brand to educate your consumers that much more because consumers have that many more questions. You would want to talk to a human being. You would want to understand what the course syllabus is. You want to know who the instructor is. Would I have lifetime access to the course if I'm picking up a digital marketing course? So one of the things that comes into play, there are several variables. One of the first things is the level of nascency of the category itself. Is it a fairly mature space or is it nascent? Now, online education as a space is a fairly nascent space compared to e-com, for example, physical product e-commerce as a space. So everything else being the same, if you're operating in a category which is maybe a sunrise category, which is fairly nascent, where consumers don't have that level of digital comfort, so to speak, then you have a greater need for engagement and nurturing. Everything else being the same again, if you are maybe a relatively unknown brand versus an omnipresent brand, then you would have, for the unknown brand, there is a greater need for engagement and nurturing because consumers don't know that brand that much. They would have that many more questions. So, so if you're operating, if you're working for a brand, if you're trying to sell a brand's offerings, which is relatively more unknown, then you've got your task cut out. Your average selling price plays a key part here as well. If you're selling products that are obviously more expensive, then consumers are going to have that many more questions. So, for example, in the EdTech case again, our average selling prices were 15,000 rupees in India, which is a fairly significant quantum of money, right? In the health tech example, our average selling prices were 8,000 rupees and above in India. Again, people are going to have more questions if it's a more expensive offering that you're selling. Your sales cycles plays a big part. So, sales cycle is defined as the time it takes for a lead to actually move from the point of being a lead to a paying customer. Both in the health tech case, our sales conversion cycles was around a month, which meant a free user who installed my app would typically take around a month to become a paying customer. Likewise, in the EdTech scenario, it was around a month and a half to 2 months. In some cases, it was a month as well. So the longer your sales life cycle, the greater is your need for engaging and nurturing that particular prospect over the duration of that life cycle. That's something that, so which is especially more important in B2B. So in B2B, your sales life cycles are possibly 6 months, 1 year, 2 years in a lot of cases, right? So what do you do for that entire intervening time frame? You need good quality content to be able to engage and nurture that audience. That's something that's very important. B2B versus B2C, which is again related to some of the points that I mentioned earlier. Service versus product also plays a big part. It's tied into the point of levels of standardization that you actually offer. Because if a significant part of your entire value proposition comprises of services, that means there is a strong human element that is being included in your value proposition. And with the human element being included, you have lowered levels of standardization. For example, in the EdTech example again, each instructor is different. So a significant component of your brand's value proposition is determined by the quality of your instructors. A significant component of, say, Healthy Family's value proposition is determined by the quality of the nutritionist. Right, so if the greater the level of service, the greater is the lower are your levels of standardization, and greater are your needs for engagement and nurturing. So these are some parameters for you to keep in mind when you actually evaluate for your own business how important or otherwise lead engagement and nurturing is. Some popular marketing automation tools. So marketing automation essentially is a function of you automating all of these touch points that you have with a prospect, with a customer, for the purposes of engagement and nurturing, for the purposes of refunneling, reactivating users, etc. I've listed a bunch of popular brands here. So there are multiple ways in which you can use lead engagement and nurturing because each business is unique. Now, what I just described was a classic use case of lead engagement and nurturing, wherein you use engagement and nurturing playbooks primarily for pushing the envelope on user conversions, right? Maybe the 10 of you have signed up on the Healthy Family app, and I'm going to engage and nurture you over the entire 1 month of your sales life cycle to make sure you become paid subscribers. That's one classic way, because I know historically that my prospects take around a month to convert. The second is, let's say you're working for Domino's, right, where the sales life cycles are possibly 5 minutes, because everybody's in a hurry to order pizza. They're too lazy to cook, they're hungry, and they want their pizza in like 5, 10, 15 minutes, max half an hour, right? So their sales life cycles are extremely short. So the brand doesn't have that level of time available at their disposal to be able to engage and nurture the audience within that time span of 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, etc. It doesn't mean engagement and nurturing isn't important there. They can't use engagement and nurturing for the purpose of converting that customer. This gentleman here is probably in a hurry to order that pizza. I can't use email, life cycle, engagement and nurture campaigns to help him convert faster, convert better. But what I can do is the next time this gentleman is thinking about ordering pizza, I can be top of mind for him. Let's say sometime next week, he's thinking of ordering pizza. Let's assume, if I may say so, let's say you're a vegetarian who likes paneer toppings, for example. And I know that he loves from his previous order history. I keep sending him customized offers on a regular basis after his order is done. I can't influence that particular order because it's too late. The transaction time window, sales life cycle is too short. But what I can do is the next time he's thinking about ordering pizza, Domino's is top of mind. So I can use lead engagement and nurturing for driving brand stickiness, loyalty, and repeat behavior. The third use case, which is a forgotten art a little bit, is about refunneling users. Let's say that I was trying to sell to maybe the 3 people sitting here in the front row, and for whatever reason, they didn't quite like my brand. So I tried my best and I gave up. So what I do then is, we used to have this term in one of my previous organizations earlier, where we used to call them quote unquote dead leads, so to speak, no disrespect. And which essentially meant that these people, we've tried our best and we've given up, not because the targeting was wrong. These people, for whatever reason, were not quite ready to pick up my paid offerings. So what I would do is, I would typically have some kind of a moratorium or a cooling off period for say 3-6 months, etc. And I would go after them again and saying that we've improved, we've changed, can we have a conversation again? Right? And this is typically doesn't require you to spend a lot of media dollars, because these people have already had an interface with me as a brand. So it's far easier for me to convert or reactivate these people instead of going after completely new cohorts. Right? That's a third use case for engagement and nurturing. So these are people who have essentially fallen outside of my marketing funnel, the classic marketing funnel. They've fallen outside. How can I refunnel them back into the funnel? That's the other use case. So a lot of you here are founders. A lot of you here may or may not understand complete marketing jargon. So if you are a CEO who hard-nosed, business-focused, dhanda-focused CEO, and you want to understand in top-line, bottom-line terms, how does lead engagement and nurture help me? In very simple terms, why do you need lifecycle emailers? Why do you need lead engagement and nurturing? There are two very strong reasons. I don't know about you guys, but in most companies, the sales guys are the most favored department of any CEO, because the CEO typically looks at them as the guys who bring in the money, and the marketing guys are the guys who spend the money. If you have a sales team which has a capacity to possibly have conversations with maybe, let's say, 1,000 leads in a given month, and you want as a CEO for them to use their time most productively. Now, through engagement and nurturing, through the concept of lead scoring, you can actually tell your sales team, listen guys, out of the funnel of 5,000 which we currently have with us, we realize you have a capacity for say just handling 1,000 leads a month. Here are the top 1,000 leads you need to focus on which have the maximum probability of conversion. So don't waste your time with the remaining 4,000. Here are the 1,000 set of leads you need to talk to. So essentially you have a more productive, a happier sales team. If the sales team is more productive, obviously that means increased top line. So your CEO is happy. The second very important reason why lead engagement and nurturing is important is that usually the marketing channel that is used for lead engagement and nurturing is usually email. It's push notifications again, if you're an app-based company, etc., which is significantly more cost effective than expensive media channels like Facebook and Google. So what that means essentially is that you're able to acquire greater volumes of customers at lower spends, or similar volumes of customers by spending lesser, which means your cost of customer acquisition actually comes down, which means your EBITDA, your bottom line actually improves. Your earnings after interest, tax, depreciation, all of that improves. So from both fronts, both in terms of top line enhancements and in terms of bottom line enhancement, you're actually better off by using engagement and nurturing. Very quickly, what we did at Simply Learn, and one of the things you've got to remember is the duration for which you try to engage and nurture your audiences is typically a function of your sales cycle. So let's say that I'm a B2B brand whose sales life cycles are possibly 2 years. There's no point in me sending, let's say she's a CIO of JP Morgan, I am Infosys, she's become my prospect. I know typically that my prospects take around 1.5 years or 2 years to convert. If I start sending her engagement and nurture emails 4 times a week, she's going to mark me as spam and unsubscribe. On the other hand, I know that I am with Simply Learn, for example, which has a lead engagement life cycle of a month, and I keep sending her one email every three months, for example. That's the other end of the spectrum. She's probably going to go with a competitor of mine. Right, that's playing it too slow, playing it too conservative. So a typical rule of thumb for you to keep in mind is typically make sure that your engagement and nurture durations are at least 3/4 of your entire sales life cycle. So if it's a month long, your sales life cycle, make sure that your drips run for around say 20-25 days, anywhere from 60 to 80%. So wherein you can make sure that you warm up and engage the leads, and then you hand it over to your sales team. It's like a relay race. You hand over the baton to your sales team for them to go in for the slam dunk and convert. That's something for you to keep in mind. So we used to have something called as a hot lead funnel, which was essentially all of those people who had shown a very strong intent for purchasing our product after having seen our price, where the communication would be a lot more aggressive, a lot more salesy. We used to have something called as a cold lead engagement and nurture funnel. It's popularly called as a drip in marketing jargon, again, very similar to water dripping off a tap, drip after drip. So we typically use the term drip if you receive a series of successive marketing communications, one after another, after some specified intervals of time. So we have a cold lead drip, which was essentially for people who are not really looking to make a purchase, but they're just interested in learning about the space. They've downloaded an ebook, they've registered for a webinar, right? They've downloaded a white paper. So they're not looking to pay me, but these are people who will possibly convert and become paying customers for me 6 months, 1 year down the line. So the kind of communication we used to use there was very, very conservative, right? I'm not going to give them a 20% discount code. right? That's going to turn them off. So how do I make sure that I engage and nurture them for future revenue streams? Repeat drip, as I said, you're a paying customer today. How do I get you to come back and repeat transact? That's something which is important. Learner, which is part of a transaction life cycle, wherein somebody's actually picked up a course, send them assignment reminders, etc. Dead lead drip, something that I was talking about. How do I get people to reactivate and come back into the funnel? People who actually dropped out. That's something which is very important again. In terms of repeat purchases, I'm sure a lot of you guys have this problem here in your organizations. You're able to acquire customers once, but how do I get them to come back and repeat transact with me? We had this exact same problem at Simply Learn because our ASPs were 15,000 bucks. It's very difficult for me to convince, say, this gentleman has just spent 15,000 bucks picking up a digital marketing course. How do I get him to come back and say that come back and spend another 15,000, 20,000 bucks with me in learning another aspect of, say, let's say I want you to learn data science, for example. So we instituted the concept of a learning path to be able to solve this problem. Wherein we said that I'm not just an education service provider, but I'm actually a learning path creator for you. So you're not done if you take this one course. You're here at the base of this mountain. You want this aspirational job of the CEO, of the CMO, which is the top of the mountain, and here is the learning path which can actually get you there. So we pivoted our communication to focus on learning path-led communication, and I said that you've done this one course now here's the next course that you need to take to get to that aspirational peak. That's something that we did, and that helped us really push the envelope on repeats. That's something for you to keep in mind as well. So you've got to make sure that you're able to craft your value proposition in a compelling enough fashion so that consumers see the value in actually coming back to you again and again. And obviously you've got to target this well. There's no point in you targeting people who picked up maybe a 4,000 rupee course, for example, in this particular context, and ask them to come back and repeat transact. So you've got to make sure that you target the relevant user cohorts for you to be able to push the envelope on repeat user behavior. That's something that's extremely important for any business. It's not just about new acquisitions. How do you get your existing customers to continue to repeat transact with you? That's something which is very important. We had a whole bunch of drip emailers for repeats, and that really helped us push repeats, which was, say, under 2%. To something which started contributing almost 15% of our revenues, started coming in from repeat customers over 3 successive quarters of sustained effort. That's all I had for you guys today. I hope this was useful. Love to know if you guys have any questions. We can meet up afterwards after the session as well. We have a booth right outside, the Razorpay booth. If you have questions, we could chat right now or we could chat at the booth. I hope this was useful. Thank you so much for your time.